Tomorrow. A Pinocchio fanfiction written by Jukebox Straws. Read by Jukebox Straws. Chapter 3. Last Call. The next morning, John woke to the sound of the church bells ringing, signaling another day. Children rushed by outside the window on their way to school. Pinocchio was already awake and dressed, rummaging through the trunk at the end of his bed, finding his books. "Good morning, John. Good morning, Gideon." John froze. If the church bells were ringing, that meant the sun was already up. Fuck. He shot up faster than he'd ever had before, and nearly startled Gideon, who was already sitting at the breakfast table. "What time is it?" John asked. It was only a moment later he realized how stupid that question was, when he was literally surrounded by clocks. One quick glance told him it was about 9 in the morning. They should have been on the way out of Italy by now, but they were still alive, still here, so the coachman hadn't found them yet. "I know you said you had to go." Geppetto got John's attention by placing a platter of freshly baked biscuits and a plate of eggs on the table. "But I figured you two would want some breakfast. It's a long journey out of Italy." John's mouth watered as Gideon began to fill his plate. He couldn't remember the last time he had a home-cooked meal, using his minuscule funds to either buy himself and Gideon a bowl of something stale at a shady tavern, or buying nearly expired food from vendors that were on sale. "Okay, maybe just a quick meal, then we have to—" John was shut up as he got a good whiff of biscuits, eggs, bacon, and— "Coffee?" Geppetto asked, holding out a cup. John hadn't had coffee in years, mostly because it was always too expensive. Alcohol was cheaper. John took the cup, hesitantly, nodding a bit of thanks. As he sipped it, words of protest and the urgency to leave instantly fled his body and brain. "I haven't had good coffee in years," he muttered, as Gideon downed his cup and nearly stuffed a whole biscuit into his mouth. Geppetto laughed as he sat down and began to eat himself. "I can only afford it once in a while, but I figured since we have guests, now would be a good time to make some." The woodcarver sipped his own cup as he began to dig into the eggs. Breakfast was slow and warm. Pinocchio had a short breakfast of eggs on a biscuit before he ran out the door. John enjoyed the chirping of birds outside and the milling about of strangers as he sipped his bitter drink, sweetened by sugar and milk. He and Gideon had both eaten nearly 5 plates between the two of them. Geppetto happily served them more, seeing how gaunt and hungry they were. Their layered clothing did wonders to hide their frailty. However, Geppetto knew hungry boys when he saw them. Geppetto was very observant, always had been. That was how he'd managed to excel at wood carving where others had failed. He had some uncanny sense to know which wood was good to use, how to carve it so it didn't split or break. That was how all of his products were so high quality. That was also how he noticed John staring at the bookshelf in the corner, eyes squinted, trying to read the spines. "Do you have a favorite?" he asked. John snapped out of it. No." He turned back to his nearly empty coffee cup. "Never really one for reading." "Were you ever taught?" Geppetto stood and moved to the shelf, picking up a children's book he'd gotten for Pinocchio. "Not after—" John gestured to his entirety. Geppetto sat beside him, and John's tail tucked itself under the seat, not used to having someone so close to him, other than Gideon. He wasn't really a touchy kind of guy. "I can teach you. I'm ahead of my work, so I can take a morning off." Geppetto didn't wait for John to answer before opening the book to the first page. John eyed the colorful pictures. He felt embarrassed for needing to learn practically from scratch, a skill that was becoming more widely required. Pinocchio could probably read better than him at this point. Brave, truthful, unselfish. Be good. The words rang through his mind. Be good. He inhaled sharply. "Thank you," he muttered as he leaned closer to the book. They had decided it would be best to wait until evening so they could catch the last train under the cover of darkness. Pinocchio would guide them to the station and then come straight home. "Thank you again for your kindness." John felt strangely vulnerable as he gave Geppetto a nod. The old man simply nodded back and held the door as they all left. Then they followed Pinocchio down the street. They walked through the city, John's anxiety spiking every time the squeaking of a coach's wheels or the sounds of clopping hooves got too close. The coachman could still find them at any moment, could take a pistol to their heads or a whip to their backs. John felt Gideon's hand under his cloak. As they passed through silent, still farmland, the sun was setting over the mountains, deep oranges and yellows and purples lining the sky and the smattering of clouds that still remained. A few donkeys were still working in the fields, pulling plows and carts. John eyed them. Half the donkeys in this part of Italy were supplied by Pleasure Island. It was a 50-50 shot. Suddenly, Pinocchio stopped. "Lampwick?" John looked around, assuming it was one of Pinocchio's school friends, but he couldn't see anyone else nearby. His heart sank when Pinocchio jumped a nearby fence and ran straight for a sickly-looking donkey pulling a plow. "Lampwick!" Pinocchio dropped to his knees and held the muzzle of the creature. The donkey was rail-thin, showing ribs and sweating like nobody's business. John could practically hear the creature's heart pounding as it gave a soft bray. Its sad brown eyes lit up a bit, like it recognized the old friend. "Oh, Lampy, what did they do to you?" Pinocchio's eyes filled with tears as he stroked a hand over the donkey's muzzle. Lampwick let out a bray that turned into a sigh as he collapsed onto the dirt, unable to tug the plow along any longer. "I'm sorry, Lampy," Pinocchio cried as he pulled the donkey's head into his lap. The creature panted now, lethargic, fur drenched in sweat, ears drooping, skin and bones. John had watched plenty of creatures take their final breath, but somehow this one was the worst of them all. That poor boy. At least he was out of his misery now, off to a better place, he hoped. The rotten cherry on the moldy cake was Pinocchio's tear-filled eyes looking at him. "You did this." He seemed to say it without any words at all. "You let this happen." John stayed silent, tail tucked between his legs, as they made it to the train station. There were still people milling about, even this late, and John approached the ticket counter. He pulled out the few coins he and Gideon had and slapped them down. "How far will this get us?" he asked. The man in the booth looked at John, then down at the coins. "Not going to try and negotiate, John?" he asked. John huffed. His fingers twitched with the urge to do just that, to slip back into his persona, to put on that fake accent and try to swindle the Ticketmaster into a few extra miles of track for his money. But one look over at Pinocchio, and he knew that attempt would ruin his promise to the fairy. Truthful. He had to be truthful. Easier said than done when your whole personality was crafted on a lie. "Not this time. Just tell me how far this takes us." He slid the coins closer to the Ticketmaster, who picked them up and examined them, counted them, then checked his papers. "It'll get you to Florence," the Ticketmaster said. John checked the map and saw it was about a day out. Not as far as he'd hoped, but far enough. "We'll take it." John snatched up the 2 tickets and handed one to Gideon. As the last train pulled into the station, he turned to give his thanks to the little boy who'd helped him. Pinocchio? But Pinocchio was nowhere to be found. Did he leave already, sick of seeing John's face? No, he wasn't that cruel. He'd at least see that they got on the train safely before he left for home. "Pinocchio?" John looked around. Something was wrong. Something was really wrong. He could feel it. That gnawing feeling at his gut like he was starving but couldn't stomach anything. Gideon tugged his sleeve and pointed, his expression horrified as they both saw the little boy being carried off by a figure dressed in all black. "Pinocchio!" John jerked, instinct to follow the boy, but then the train whistle sounded. Last call to board. He could leave. They could leave, right now, get on that train to Florence and never come back to this town again. He looked at the ticket in his hand, his ticket to freedom. But Pinocchio had helped him. It wasn't fair if he got off scot-free while that poor boy was once again taken advantage of. John's hand shook as he stuffed the ticket into his pocket and grabbed Gideon's hand, running to catch up to the black coach, leaving with Pinocchio stuffed in the trunk. "Come on, Giddy." To be continued in Chapter 4.